Poor little girl, taken from her father, ate leftovers until she met the CEO who saved her life. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to the channel and type Amen in the comments. A beautiful piece of good news may come your way very soon. And don't forget to tell us where you're watching from. The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Daniel Carter's downtown law firm like bullets from the sky. At 39, he had built an empire from nothing. Carter and Associates dominated Seattle's legal landscape, and his name alone could make opposing counsel tremble. But today, sitting in his mahogany-paneled office, surrounded by awards and accolades, Daniel felt utterly empty. 5 years. 5 years since Lisa died, and the guilt still ate at him every morning when he woke up alone in his penthouse. His younger sister had been everything to him, the only family he had left after their parents died, in that car crash when he was 25. Lisa had been 19 then, beautiful and wild, with dreams bigger than the city itself. The brass letter opener felt cold in his hands as he sliced through the envelope that had arrived with no return address. The handwriting was feminine, careful, as if written by someone taking great care with every word. His breath caught in his throat as he unfolded the single sheet of paper. "Daniel, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and I never found the courage to call you like I planned. I should have told you years ago, but I was scared. Mia is your daughter. She's 8 now, brilliant beyond her years, but she needs you. Her sister Rachel is trying her best, but they're struggling. The address is 1247 Maple Street, apartment 3B. Please don't let my pride destroy what's left of our family. She has your eyes and your stubborn streak. Find her before it's too late. I'm sorry for everything. I wrote this letter as insurance, updating it every year, hoping I'd never have to send it, but knowing Mia deserved family if something happened to me. Love always, Lisa." The letter fluttered to the floor as Daniel's hands began to shake. Daughter? Impossible. He would have known. Lisa would have told him, wouldn't she? But as memories flooded back, pieces began falling into place like shards of broken glass. Lisa's sudden distance 5 years before her death, her refusal to let him visit her apartment. The way she'd avoided family gatherings and made excuses. His secretary, Margaret, knocked and entered without waiting for permission, a privilege earned through 15 years of loyal service. "Mr. Carter, your 3 o'clock appointment is here and—" She stopped mid-sentence, seeing his face. "Sir, are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Cancel everything," Daniel whispered, his voice hoarse. "Cancel everything for the rest of the week." "Sir, Margaret, I need you to run a background check on someone, discreetly." He picked up the letter with trembling fingers. 1247 Maple Street, apartment 3B. "I need to know everything about who lives there, everything." As Margaret quietly left, Daniel sank into his leather chair, staring at the address written in his dead sister's handwriting. Rain continued to pound against the windows, but all he could hear was the thundering of his own heartbeat. Across town, in a cramped apartment where the heating barely worked and the refrigerator hummed with emptiness, 8-year-old Mia Henderson sat at a cardboard table, carefully dividing a single can of soup into 2 bowls. Her blonde hair fell in waves around her shoulders, and her blue eyes, so startlingly similar to Daniel's, focused intently on making sure each portion was exactly equal. "Rachel," she called softly to the figure slumped on their threadbare couch. "Dinner's ready." Rachel Henderson, 28 years old and looking every day of 40, raised her head from her hands. Dark circles shadowed her brown eyes, and her once beautiful face showed the strain of carrying burdens too heavy for any one person. She'd been raising Mia since their mother died 6 years ago, and the responsibility had aged her beyond her years. "Thanks, sweetheart," Rachel managed, forcing a smile. "You're getting too good at this grown-up stuff." Mia climbed onto the couch beside her sister, carefully balancing the bowl. "Mrs. Patterson from downstairs brought us some crackers today. She said she made too many, but I think she was being nice." Rachel's heart clenched. Even at 8, Mia understood their situation with a clarity that broke Rachel's soul. The little girl never complained about their empty cupboards, or the fact that her shoes had holes, or that she wore the same 3 outfits to school in rotation. Instead, she studied with an intensity that amazed her teachers and helped Rachel whenever she could. "Mia, what if I told you that somewhere out there you might have family we've never met?" The little girl looked up, those impossibly blue eyes wide with curiosity. "Like aunts and uncles?" "Maybe," Rachel whispered, thinking about the letter she'd found hidden in their mother's things, the letter she'd finally found the courage to send last week. "Would you want to meet them if we could find them?" Mia considered this with the seriousness of someone much older. "Only if they're nice, and only if they won't take me away from you." "Adrian," Rachel pulled her little sister close, breathing in the scent of cheap shampoo and childhood innocence. "No one will ever take you away from me, I promise." But even as she said the words, Rachel wondered if she was making a promise she might not be able to keep. Daniel sat in his Mercedes outside 1247 Maple Street as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of amber and regret. The building was nothing like the neighborhoods he frequented. A rundown complex with peeling paint and broken playground equipment scattered across a patch of dying grass. His chest tightened as he imagined his possible daughter living here, struggling in ways he'd never had to struggle. Margaret's background check had revealed more than he'd wanted to know. Rachel Henderson, unemployed for 3 months after the diner where she worked closed down. Multiple eviction notices, past due utility bills. And Mia Henderson, 8 years old, honor roll student at Lincoln Elementary, despite missing school occasionally for reasons the teachers suspected but never reported. The math was crushing in its simplicity. If Lisa had gotten pregnant at 24 and hidden it from him, Mia would be exactly 8 years old now. The timing aligned perfectly with Lisa's withdrawal from his life, her sudden move across the city, her refusal to accept his financial help. His phone buzzed, a text from Margaret. "Background complete. Birth certificate shows father listed as unknown. Child welfare has no reports of abuse or neglect, but neighbors report concerns about food security. Teachers describe child as exceptionally intelligent, but often hungry." Daniel closed his eyes, and for a moment he wasn't a powerful attorney sitting in a luxury car. He was that scared 25-year-old again, promising his dying parents that he'd always take care of Lisa. He'd failed then, and now, if this letter was real, he'd failed again. A movement caught his eye. A young woman emerged from the building, her dark hair pulled back in a tired ponytail, followed by a small blonde girl who moved with careful, practiced steps. Even from a distance, the resemblance was undeniable. The set of her shoulders, the way she tilted her head when she was thinking, it was Lisa, but it was also him. As they walked toward the small market on the corner, Daniel watched Mia count coins from a small purse, her sister bending down to whisper something that made the little girl nod seriously. They disappeared into the store, and Daniel found himself getting out of his car, drawn by a force he couldn't name. Through the market's grimy windows, he watched them navigate the aisles with the efficiency of people who'd done this dance many times before. Mia held a calculator, carefully checking prices, while Rachel picked up items and put them back down. The intimacy of their struggle, the way they communicated without words, spoke of a bond forged in hardship. When they emerged, Mia was carrying a single bag that looked pathetically small, but she was smiling at something Rachel had said. They walked past Daniel's car without noticing him, and he heard Mia's clear, bright voice. "Tomorrow, I'm going to finish that story I'm writing for you, the one about the princess who saves everyone." Daniel sat back in his Mercedes and cried for the first time since Lisa's funeral. The law offices of Carter and Associates had never felt more like a prison. Daniel had spent 3 sleepless nights researching, planning, and trying to figure out how to approach 2 strangers who might be his family. His usual confidence, the courtroom presence that had made him legendary, deserted him completely when he thought about walking up to that apartment door. Margaret knocked and entered with his morning coffee and a concerned expression. "Sir, you haven't eaten anything in days." And Mrs. Williams called. "You missed the Henderson settlement meeting yesterday." "The what?" Daniel looked up from the stack of papers he'd been pretending to read. "The Henderson settlement, sir. Ironic name considering." She gestured toward his desk, where he'd left the letter and background check materials spread out like evidence in a case he couldn't solve. Henderson. He'd been so focused on Mia and Rachel's situation that he hadn't even noticed they shared a surname with one of his biggest clients. The universe seemed determined to weave connections he couldn't ignore. "Margaret, I need you to do something for me, something unusual." His secretary sat down, her pen poised with the efficiency of someone accustomed to unusual requests from her boss. "Of course, sir. I want to help that family anonymously. Set up a scholarship fund, grocery deliveries, utilities, whatever they need, but I don't want them to know it's coming from me. Not yet." Margaret's eyebrows rose slightly, but she simply nodded. "May I ask why the secrecy, sir?" Daniel picked up the letter, reading it for the 100th time. "Because if I walk into their lives claiming to be Mia's father, everything changes, and I need to know for certain before I turn their world upside down." "Are you planning a paternity test?" "Eventually. But first, I want to understand who they are, who Mia is. I want to know if Lisa was telling the truth and if she was." He trailed off, staring out the window at the Seattle skyline. "If she was, then I've missed 8 years of my daughter's life. I don't get those back." That afternoon, Daniel found himself doing something he'd never done before, playing hooky from his own company. He drove to Lincoln Elementary School and sat in his car during pickup time, watching for a familiar blonde head among the sea of children. When Mia emerged, she wasn't alone. She was walking with a boy who looked about her age, their heads bent together over a book. Daniel rolled down his window and caught fragments of their conversation. "But see, if you divide it this way, the answer is different," Mia was explaining, her finger tracing something on the page. "Mrs. Rodriguez taught us the advanced method, but I figured out an even faster way." The boy looked impressed and slightly intimidated. "How did you get so smart?" Mia shrugged, a gesture so reminiscent of Lisa that Daniel's chest tightened. "I just like figuring things out. My sister says understanding how things work is the best superpower." They paused at the corner where their paths diverged, and Daniel watched Mia wave goodbye before walking toward the apartment complex. Even from a distance, he could see her shoulders slump slightly once she was alone, as if she'd been performing happiness for her friend's benefit. The walk from school to her apartment took Mia past 3 fast food restaurants, a pizza place, and a bakery. Daniel watched her slow down at each one, not with longing exactly, but with the careful observation of someone cataloging information for future use. She stopped completely in front of the bakery, where day-old pastries were marked half price in the window. After counting the coins in her small purse twice, Mia went inside. Through the window, Daniel saw her speak to the elderly woman behind the counter, pointing to the cheapest item on display. But the woman smiled and handed her something much larger, a bag that clearly contained more than Mia had paid for. When Mia emerged, she was practically glowing with excitement. She clutched the bag carefully and broke into a run, eager to share her treasure with Rachel. Daniel followed at a distance, feeling like a detective investigating his own life. When Mia disappeared into the apartment building, he sat in his car, wondering what kind of man he was becoming, stalking an 8-year-old who might be his daughter, too afraid to simply knock on her door and ask the questions that were eating him alive. His phone rang. Margaret's voice was crisp and professional. "Sir, I've set up the Anonymous Assistance Program. Grocery deliveries will start tomorrow, and I've arranged for their utilities to be paid through a fictional charity. Also, there's something else you should know." "What?" "I did more research on the timing. Your sister Lisa. She was involved with someone around the time Mia would have been conceived, a man named David Henderson." Daniel's blood ran cold. "Henderson? As in Rachel's surname?" "Yes. It appears David Henderson was Rachel's father. He died in a construction accident when Rachel was 22 and Mia was approximately 2 years old. If Lisa was involved with him..." The pieces clicked into place with horrible clarity. Lisa had been involved with a married man, a man with a 6-year-old daughter named Rachel. When David died, Lisa would have been left alone, pregnant, with no way to contact Daniel without revealing her affair with a married father. "Sir, are you there?" "Keep digging," Daniel whispered. "I need to know everything." That evening, as Daniel sat in his penthouse staring at the city lights, he tried to imagine what Lisa's life had been like. Pregnant, alone, involved with a man who couldn't acknowledge her publicly. No wonder she'd hidden it from Daniel. She would have been ashamed, scared, proud in that stubborn way they'd both inherited from their father. And when David Henderson died, Lisa would have found herself connected to his daughter Rachel, bound by grief and circumstance. 2 young women, both orphaned, both struggling. Had they supported each other? Had Lisa helped raise Rachel even as she prepared for Mia's birth? The questions multiplied, like fractals, each answer revealing 10 new mysteries. But one thing was becoming clear. Mia and Rachel weren't just random people who'd received a mysterious letter. They were family in ways Daniel was only beginning to understand. His doorbell rang, a sound so unusual that for a moment Daniel didn't recognize it. He rarely had unannounced visitors. His building's security was too tight for casual drop-ins. When he opened the door, a woman stood in the hallway, and for a heart-stopping moment, he thought Lisa had come back from the dead. But this woman was older, more tired, with brown eyes instead of Lisa's blue ones. She was holding an envelope, and her hands were shaking. "Are you Daniel Carter?" Rachel's voice was barely above a whisper. "Yes. I found something else. After I sent you that letter, I kept looking through Mom's things, and She held out the envelope. "I think you need to see this." Inside was a photograph. Lisa, visibly pregnant, standing next to a man Daniel recognized from Margaret's background check as David Henderson. But what made Daniel's knees nearly buckle was what he saw in the background. A tiny toddler with dark hair and serious eyes, building blocks on a worn carpet. Rachel, at age 22, already caring for a baby who would become the sister she'd raise alone. "She loved you," Rachel said quietly. "Mom wrote about you sometimes, about how proud she was of her big brother, how she wished she could tell you about Mia but didn't know how. She wrote that letter not because she was dying, but because she was terrified something might happen to her and leave Mia without any family, except me. She updated it every year, always hoping she'd find the courage to send it while she was alive." Daniel looked up from the photograph, meeting Rachel's eyes for the first time. "She never intended for you to find it after she died." "No. She wanted to tell you herself, but she was ashamed of the affair with David, scared you'd judge her for getting involved with a married man. When David died and left us both alone, she felt like she'd made too many mistakes to deserve your help. The letter was her insurance policy, in case something happened to her before she worked up the courage to face you." Rachel's voice grew quieter. "The night before the accident, she told me she was planning to call you. She said Mia deserved to know her uncle, and maybe it was time to stop letting pride keep our family apart. If she'd lived one more day. Rachel, Daniel said gently, I think we need to talk. As she stepped into his penthouse, Daniel realized that his carefully ordered world was about to change forever. And for the first time in 5 years, that didn't terrify him. It gave him hope. The conversation that would reshape 3 lives began at Daniel's kitchen table, where Rachel sat clutching a cup of coffee she was too nervous to drink. The penthouse felt surreal to her. She'd never been anywhere with floor-to-ceiling windows and marble countertops, spaces where every object probably cost more than she made in a month. "Where's Mia tonight?" Daniel asked, settling across from her with his own untouched coffee. "Sleepover with her friend Jenny. It was planned weeks ago and I didn't want to cancel because—" Rachel's voice trailed off. "Because she doesn't get many opportunities like that." The unspoken weight of their financial situation hung between them. Daniel had read the background check. He knew about the eviction notices, the unpaid bills, the careful rationing of food. But sitting across from Rachel, seeing the pride and exhaustion warring in her expression, made it real in a way that reports couldn't capture. "Tell me about her," Daniel said softly. "Tell me about Mia." Rachel's face transformed, weariness giving way to the kind of love that made her radiant despite everything. "She's extraordinary. Not just smart, though she is that. She reads at a high school level, does math in her head that I need a calculator for. But it's more than that. She sees things differently, makes connections other people miss." "Like what?" "Last month, she figured out our upstairs neighbor was diabetic just by watching him for a week. She noticed he was always tired after meals, that he threw away a lot of food, that he walked differently on certain days. When she asked him about it, and Mia has no filter when she's curious, he was amazed. Said even his doctor hadn't picked up on the patterns that quickly." Daniel felt a flutter of recognition. As a child, he'd driven their parents crazy with similar observations, the kind of pattern recognition that would later make him a formidable attorney. "Does she know about potentially having other family?" Rachel shook her head. "Not specifically. I told her we might have relatives we've never met, but I didn't want to get her hopes up. She's been disappointed too many times already." "By me," Daniel said quietly. "By family she didn't know existed." "By circumstances," Rachel corrected firmly. "You didn't know about her. None of this is your fault." But Daniel wasn't sure he agreed. If he'd been more attentive to Lisa, more persistent when she'd started pulling away, would things have been different? The guilt was a familiar companion, one that had been eating at him since Lisa's death. "Rachel, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." She straightened, sensing the shift in his tone. "Do you believe Mia is my daughter?" Rachel was quiet for a long moment, studying his face with the same careful attention Mia applied to solving problems. "Yes," she said finally. "She has your eyes, obviously, but it's more than that. She has your intensity, I guess. When she's focused on something, the whole world disappears, and she argues like a lawyer." Despite everything, Daniel smiled. "That could be environmental." "No." Rachel shook her head. "I've seen her with other adults, other kids. She adapts her communication style, depending on who she's talking to, like she's naturally reading what approach will be most effective. It's not something I taught her. It's just who she is." Daniel felt a strange mixture of pride and loss. Pride in a daughter he'd never known he had, loss for all the moments he'd missed. What does she want to be when she grows up? "Changes every week," Rachel laughed. "Last week, she wanted to be a marine biologist who designs video games on the side. This week, she's thinking about becoming a teacher because Mrs. Rodriguez lets her help tutor the other kids. She likes helping people. She likes solving problems. People problems, math problems, doesn't matter. Give Mia a puzzle and she won't rest until she figures it out. Rachel's expression grew serious. The problem is, she's been trying to solve our money problems for months now. She suggested she could get a paper route, or maybe we could start a small business selling her drawings at the farmer's market. She's 8 years old, and she's trying to figure out how to pay our rent. The weight of that settled over Daniel like a physical presence. While he'd been working late, making more money than he could spend, his daughter had been calculating how to afford groceries. "I want to help," he said carefully, "but I don't want to disrupt what you've built with her. You're her stability, her security. I understand that." Rachel's eyes filled with tears she'd been holding back. "I love her more than my own life, but I'm failing her, Daniel. I can't give her what she needs, what she deserves. Some nights I lie awake wondering if keeping her with me is selfish. It's not selfish. It's love. Love doesn't pay for dental care or new shoes or college funds." Daniel reached across the table, carefully placing his hand over Rachel's. "What if it didn't have to be a choice? What if we could figure out a way to be family together?" "You don't understand," Rachel whispered. "I'm not educated like you. I didn't go to college. I've been working minimum wage jobs since I was 16, and I'm not. I'm not the kind of person who fits into your world." "My world is pretty empty right now," Daniel admitted. "Maybe what it needs is people who care more about doing right than fitting in." Rachel looked around his penthouse, the expensive furniture, the wall of legal awards, the view that probably cost more per month than she'd made in a year. "When I was Mia's age, I used to dream about living in a place like this, having enough money that I never had to count coins for groceries or choose between electricity and heat." "What happened to those dreams?" "Life happened. My dad died when I was 22. I was working 2 jobs and going to community college part-time, trying to figure out how to take care of myself. Suddenly, I had a 2-year-old sister who'd just lost her mom and stepdad. The social worker said they could find separate foster homes for both of us, but I couldn't let that happen." Rachel's voice grew stronger. "Mia was this tiny, scared little thing who would only stop crying when I held her. How could I let strangers take care of her when she needed me?" "So you gave up college." "I gave up everything." "College? My part-time job at the bookstore that I actually loved, my boyfriend who couldn't handle the responsibility, my apartment that was finally starting to feel like home." Rachel met his eyes. "I don't regret it for a second, but I won't pretend it wasn't hard." Daniel felt a surge of respect for this woman who had sacrificed her entire future for a child who wasn't even biologically hers. "Rachel, what you did, that's not something most people would be capable of. Any decent person would have done the same thing." "No," Daniel said firmly. "Most people would have convinced themselves that Mia would be better off with a real family. Most people would have found a way to justify the easy choice. You made the hard choice because it was the right choice." Rachel was quiet for a long moment, staring at her untouched coffee. "Some nights, when Mia was little and would have nightmares about losing everyone she loved, I'd wonder if I was enough, if my love could make up for all the things I couldn't give her." "What did you decide?" "That love was the only thing that really mattered, and everything else was just details to figure out." She smiled sadly. "Though I have to admit, some of those details have been pretty overwhelming." Daniel leaned forward. "Tell me about the hardest parts. Not the money. I can see that from the outside. But the parts that don't show up on a background check." Rachel took a shaky breath. "The loneliness, mostly. Mia is incredible company, but she's 8 years old. There's no one my age in my life who understands what it's like to be responsible for everything. Every meal, every medical decision, every school conference, every scraped knee and bad dream and moment of terror that I'm going to fail her. What about friends? Other parents?" Hard to make friends with other parents when you can't afford playdates or birthday parties or any of the social activities that bring families together. And friends my own age. Rachel shrugged. Most people in their 20s aren't interested in hanging out with someone who has to be home by 8 because her kid has school the next day. Daniel thought about his own social life, business dinners, professional networking events, casual drinks with colleagues who shared his interests and income level. The idea of navigating parenthood without any peer support seemed impossible. Rachel, can I ask about Mia's father, the man Lisa was involved with? Rachel's expression grew complicated. David was complicated. He loved Lisa genuinely, I think, but he was married and had been for years. His wife was battling cancer. She died 6 months after he did, and he couldn't leave her during treatment. Lisa understood that, but it made their relationship impossible. How much did you know about their relationship while it was happening? More than I wanted to. Lisa needed someone to talk to, and I was barely an adult, but I was trying to be mature about everything. She'd come over crying some nights because David couldn't acknowledge her publicly, couldn't be there for doctor's appointments or just normal couple things. Other nights she'd be glowing because he'd managed to steal away a few hours to spend with her and Mia. It must have been painful for her. It was painful for everyone. David felt guilty about the affair, guilty about not being able to be a real father to Mia, guilty about keeping secrets from his dying wife. Lisa felt guilty about being involved with a married man, guilty about wanting more than he could give her. And I felt guilty because part of me was angry at both of them for creating such a mess when there was a baby involved. Daniel processed this information, trying to imagine his sister navigating such an emotionally complex situation. What was David like with Mia? Rachel's face softened. He adored her. When he could visit, which wasn't often, he'd spend hours just watching her play, reading to her, teaching her little songs. Mia was too young to understand why he couldn't always be there, but she lit up when she saw him. After he died, Rachel's voice trailed off. What? Mia kept asking when Daddy David was coming back. She was only 2, but she remembered him so clearly. Lisa tried to explain that he'd gone away, but Mia would stand at the window waiting for his car. It broke Lisa's heart because she couldn't even take Mia to visit his grave. David's wife didn't know about them, and Lisa didn't want to cause more pain during an already devastating time. The weight of all this family history settled over Daniel like a blanket. These weren't just strangers who happened to share his DNA. They were people who had been shaped by loss and sacrifice and love in ways that were both heartbreaking and inspiring. They sat in silence for several minutes, both lost in thought. Finally, Rachel spoke again. If we did a paternity test and it confirmed what we both think is true, what then? What would you want? Daniel had been asking himself the same question for days. I'd want to be her father, not just her biological donor. I'd want to make sure she never has to worry about basic needs again. I'd want to give her every opportunity to develop her gifts. And he paused, meeting Rachel's eyes. I'd want to make sure she never has to choose between her family and her future, even if that family includes me. Especially if it includes you. Rachel, you raised an extraordinary little girl under impossible circumstances. You kept her safe, loved, curious about the world. You gave her everything that matters most. I can provide financial security, but I can't replace what you've already given her. Rachel wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I'm scared, she admitted. Of what? Of hoping. Of letting myself believe that things could actually get better. Every time I've hoped for something good, it's been taken away. Daniel understood that fear. It had been his constant companion since Lisa's death. What if we start small? What if I just got to know her? As your friend, maybe, someone who wants to help out. She's very observant, she'll figure out there's more to it. Is that necessarily bad? Rachel considered this. She asks a lot of questions. I like answering questions. She'll want to know why you're suddenly interested in us, where you came from, what your intentions are. She doesn't trust easily. She's been let down before. By who? Rachel's expression darkened. Teachers who promised extra help and then forgot. Social workers who said they'd check on us and never came back. My ex-boyfriend, who said he didn't mind that I came with a kid and then left the minute things got difficult. Mia stopped believing in promises from adults about 2 years ago. Then I'll have to earn her trust, Daniel said simply. However long it takes. Something in his tone must have convinced Rachel because she nodded slowly. Okay, we can try. But Daniel? Yes? If you hurt her, if you get her hopes up and then disappear when this gets complicated or inconvenient, I will make your life very difficult. I may not be a lawyer, but I'm creative when it comes to protecting what matters to me. Daniel smiled, recognizing something of his own fierce protectiveness in Rachel's tone. I'd expect nothing less. As Rachel prepared to leave, she turned back at the door. There's something else you should know about Mia. What? She dreams about having a dad. She's never told me directly, but sometimes I hear her talking to her stuffed animals about it. She wonders what it would be like to have someone who could teach her things, take her places, be proud of her accomplishments. She's convinced herself it's just a fantasy, but the longing is still there. Daniel felt his throat tighten. Rachel. Yeah? Thank you. For raising her, for finding the courage to reach out, for giving me a chance to be part of her life. Don't thank me yet, Rachel replied. Wait until you've spent a full day with her. She's amazing, but she's also exhausting. Her brain never stops, and she assumes everyone else can keep up. After Rachel left, Daniel stood at his windows looking out at the city lights, thinking about an 8-year-old girl who was probably lying in bed at a sleepover, dreaming about fathers who existed only in her imagination. Tomorrow, if everything went according to plan, he would begin the process of changing that. His phone buzzed with a text from Margaret. Anonymous grocery delivery completed successfully. Building Super was suspicious but accepted the explanation. Utilities caught up. Scholarship fund established. Next steps? Daniel typed back, arrange casual meeting. Make it seem natural. I need to meet my daughter. As he prepared for bed, Daniel found himself doing something he hadn't done in years. He prayed, not to any particular god, but to the universe, to Lisa's memory, to whatever force had brought that letter to his door. Help me do this right, he whispered into the darkness. Help me be the father she deserves. The Lincoln Elementary School playground buzzed with the controlled chaos of recess. But Daniel's attention focused entirely on one small blonde figure sitting alone under an oak tree, reading a book that looked far too advanced for a second grader. He'd been planning this accidental meeting for 3 days, coordinating with Margaret to ensure he'd be walking past the school at precisely the right time. Mia looked up as his shadow fell across her page, those startling blue eyes meeting his with curiosity rather than fear. Up close, the resemblance was even more overwhelming. She had Lisa's delicate features, but his strong jaw, his focused intensity. Excuse me, she said politely, but you're blocking my light. Daniel stepped aside quickly. Sorry, that's quite a book you're reading there. Mia held up the cover, Advanced Physics for Young Minds. She spoke with the matter-of-fact tone of someone accustomed to adult surprise at her reading choices. Most of it's pretty basic, but Chapter 7 has some interesting stuff about quantum mechanics. Quantum mechanics, Daniel repeated, fighting to keep his expression neutral. Find it useful? Well, I can't exactly build a particle accelerator in our apartment, Mia replied with a slight smile, but understanding how things work at the smallest level helps me think about bigger problems differently. Before Daniel could respond, a woman's voice called across the playground, Mia, time to go, sweetheart. Daniel turned to see a stunning brunette approaching, Tall, confident, with warm brown eyes and a smile that seemed to light up the space around her. She wore scrubs under a light jacket, and her entire demeanor radiated competence and kindness. "Dr. Sarah," Mia said, jumping up with obvious affection, "this man was asking about my book." Sarah Chen extended her hand to Daniel with professional courtesy. "Sarah Chen, I'm a pediatric nurse at Seattle Children's Hospital. You are?" "Daniel Carter." He shook her hand, noting the strength in her grip and the way her presence seemed to calm something anxious in Mia's posture. "I was just impressed by Mia's reading material." "Daddy, she's remarkable," Sarah said, her voice filled with genuine admiration as she looked down at the little girl. "Mia, why don't you gather your things? Rachel asked me to pick you up today since she had that job interview." As Mia packed her book into a worn backpack, Daniel seized the opportunity. "Job interview?" Sarah's expression grew slightly cautious. "Are you a friend of the family?" "I'm, potentially. It's complicated." Something in his tone must have reassured her, because Sarah nodded slowly. "She's interviewing for a position at Morrison's restaurant downtown. The pay is better than what she was making, but the hours are tough. Night shift, weekends." Daniel's lawyer instincts kicked in. That would mean less time with Mia. "Rachel's doing her best," Sarah said, a protective edge creeping into her voice. "She's an amazing guardian to that little girl." "I wasn't criticizing," Daniel said quickly. "I have a lot of respect for what she's done." Mia reappeared at Sarah's side, looking up at both adults with the calculating expression Daniel was beginning to recognize. "You two are talking about Rachel like she's not going to get the job." "We just want her to succeed," Sarah assured her. "She will," Mia said with absolute confidence. "She's smarter than people think. She just never had the chance to prove it." As they prepared to leave, Mia surprised Daniel by stepping closer to him. "Mr. Carter, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Are you the reason Mrs. Patterson suddenly had extra groceries to share? And why the electric company called to say our bill was paid by mistake?" Daniel's carefully planned anonymity crumbled under the weight of an 8-year-old's deductive reasoning. "What makes you think that?" "Process of elimination," Mia replied calmly. "Mrs. Patterson has never had enough food to share before. The utility company doesn't make mistakes like that. Someone with resources has been helping us, and you're the first person with obvious wealth who's shown any interest in our situation." She paused, studying his face. "Also, you look like someone who would want to help, but wouldn't know how to do it directly." Sarah stared at Mia in amazement. "How did you—" "It's just logic," Mia said matter-of-factly. "The question is why. Mr. Carter, do you know something about our family that we don't know?" Daniel found himself at a crossroads he hadn't expected to reach so soon. This 8-year-old had just dismantled his careful planning with nothing more than observation and reasoning. "Mia, that's a very complicated question." "I like complicated questions," she replied. "They usually have the most interesting answers." Before Daniel could respond, his phone rang. Margaret's voice was urgent. "Sir, you need to come to the office immediately. There's been a development with the Henderson situation." "What kind of development?" "Ooh, the kind that changes everything. How soon can you be here?" Daniel looked at Mia, who was watching him with those two knowing eyes, then at Sarah, who seemed to be rapidly reassessing his presence in their lives. "I'll be right there." As he hung up, Mia stepped forward. "Mr. Carter, whatever you found out, we can handle it. Rachel and I have been handling difficult things our whole lives." "I know you have," Daniel said softly, "but maybe it's time you didn't have to handle them alone." The law offices felt different when Daniel returned, charged with an electricity that had nothing to do with the storm brewing outside. Margaret met him at the elevator with a manila folder and an expression he'd never seen before. Part excitement, part concern, entirely urgent. "Sir, you need to see this before you go any further with the Henderson family." In his office, Margaret spread the contents of the folder across his desk like evidence in the case of his life. I kept digging into the connection between your sister Lisa and David Henderson, and I found something extraordinary. The first document was a marriage certificate. Lisa Marie Carter and David James Henderson, married in a small ceremony 8 months before Mia's birth. The second document made Daniel's knees buckle. Adoption papers, filed by Lisa Henderson, legally adopting Rachel Henderson as her daughter 6 months after David's death. She married him, Daniel whispered. Lisa married him. Yes, sir, which means Rachel isn't just Mia's half-sister through their mother. She's Mia's legal sister through adoption, and since Lisa was your sister, Rachel is legally my niece. Daniel sank into his chair, the implications washing over him. And if Mia is my biological daughter, then you have 2 family members, not 1. Both with legal claims to your support, both orphaned by circumstances you knew nothing about. But Margaret wasn't finished. She placed a final document in front of him, Lisa's will, filed after her marriage, but never probated because no one knew it existed. In it, Lisa left everything to her husband David's daughter Rachel, with specific instructions about Mia's care, and a letter to be opened only if something happened to both parents. Where's the letter? Margaret's expression grew somber. That's the problem, sir. According to the records, it was supposed to be in a safety deposit box at First National Bank, but when I called to verify, it's missing. Not missing, accessed 2 weeks ago by someone with legal authorization. Daniel felt the world shifting beneath him again. Who has legal authorization to access Lisa's safety deposit box? Her next of kin, her brother. Margaret paused meaningfully. Or her legally adopted daughter. Daniel stared at the adoption papers. Rachel had legal access as Lisa's adopted daughter. Exactly. She found the additional letter in the safety deposit box, the one Lisa wrote specifically about you. That's how she knew your full name, your law firm, everything she needed to reach out. She'd been carrying that letter for 2 weeks, trying to work up the courage to send the first one. The pieces clicked into place with perfect clarity. Rachel hadn't been orchestrating anything sinister. She'd been a terrified young woman who'd discovered her sister had a father and spent weeks agonizing over whether to contact him. Sir, Rachel Henderson didn't just stumble upon that first letter in her mother's things, but it wasn't calculated. She found Lisa's will and the adoption papers first, then went to the bank to see if there was more information. The additional letter in the safety deposit box was Lisa's insurance policy, detailed instructions about contacting you if anything ever happened to her. Rachel waited so long because she was scared of losing Mia, not because she was planning anything. As thunder rolled across the Seattle skyline, Daniel realized that everything he thought he knew about his introduction to Mia and Rachel wasn't manipulation. It was the desperate hope of a family that had been alone too long. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mr. Carter, this is Sarah Chen. Mia asked me to give you my number. She said to tell you that she's figured out why you're really interested in their family, and she wants to meet with you tomorrow, alone. Daniel stared at the message, wondering how an 8-year-old had managed to stay 2 steps ahead of him at every turn. Whatever game was being played, Mia had just changed the rules entirely. The coffee shop on Pine Street was nearly empty at 2 o'clock on a Wednesday afternoon, which was exactly what Daniel had hoped for when he suggested the meeting location. What he hadn't expected was for Mia to arrive precisely on time, walking through the door with the purposeful stride of someone who had never doubted she belonged anywhere she chose to be. She slid into the booth across from him and folded her hands on the table with a composure that would have impressed his most seasoned corporate clients. Thank you for meeting me, Mr. Carter. Thank you for asking, though I have to admit, I'm curious how you convinced Sarah to bring you here without Rachel knowing. Mia's smile was enigmatic. I told Sarah I needed to have an important conversation with a potential family member, and that sometimes adults need to hear difficult truths from children before they can make good decisions. And she believed that? Sarah is very smart. She's also been watching Rachel struggle for months, and she knows we need help, even if Rachel's too proud to ask for it. Mia paused, studying Daniel's face with unsettling intensity. She also thinks you're not telling us everything about why you're interested in our situation. Daniel felt like he was being cross-examined by the world's youngest prosecutor. What do you think? I think, Mia said carefully, that you're my father. The words hung in the air between them like a challenge. Daniel had prepared for this moment, rehearsed various ways to handle the conversation, but none of his preparation had accounted for the direct, unflinching gaze of an 8-year-old who had just voiced the question that had been consuming him for weeks. What makes you think that? Evidence, Mia replied matter-of-factly. Physical resemblance, which could be coincidental but probably isn't. Your sudden interest in our welfare, combined with your resources and lack of obvious motivation, unless there's a personal connection. The timing of your appearance in our lives, which correlates with Rachel going through Mom's old papers. She leaned forward slightly. Also, you react to me the way people react when they see something they recognize. Daniel felt a mixture of pride and terror. Pride because this brilliant little girl was quite possibly his daughter. Terror because she was clearly capable of outmaneuvering him intellectually. Mia, even if what you're suggesting is true, it's not that simple. Why not? You're either my biological father or you're not. Everything else is just logistics. What about Rachel? What about the life you've built together? For the first time, Mia's composure cracked slightly. I love Rachel more than anything in the world. She saved me when Mom died, and she's been the best sister anyone could ask for. But she stopped, clearly struggling with something. But she's 28 years old, and she's never had a chance to have her own life because she's been taking care of me. She deserves more than working double shifts to keep us fed. She deserves to fall in love, maybe get married, have her own family. Mia's voice grew quiet. I've been holding her back. Mia, that's not true. It is true, and Rachel would never admit it because she loves me too much. But I see how she looks at other people our age when they talk about college, or traveling, or dating. She gave up everything for me, and I can't let her keep sacrificing her future for my security. Daniel felt his heart breaking for both sisters. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that if you're really my father, maybe there's a way for everyone to get what they need. You get to be a dad, I get financial security and educational opportunities, and Rachel gets a chance to build her own life. You're talking about leaving Rachel. I'm talking about loving her enough to let her go. The maturity in Mia's voice was staggering. Daniel had known corporate executives with decades of experience who couldn't think this strategically about complex emotional situations. Mia, what if I told you there might be another option? Like what? Daniel took a deep breath. What if we could be a family together, all of us? You mean you, me, and Rachel? I mean all of us, including someone else who's been important in your life recently. Mia's eyes narrowed with interest. Sarah. You like her? Sarah is amazing. She's smart and kind, and she actually listens when kids talk. Plus, she makes Rachel smile in a way I haven't seen since before Mom got sick. Mia paused, processing. You think Sarah might want to be part of our family? I think Sarah cares about both of you more than she's admitted. And I think she's been looking for a family as much as we have. Have you talked to her about this? Not yet. But I've been watching how she interacts with you and Rachel, and I think she's already halfway in love with both of you. Mia was quiet for several minutes, her analytical mind clearly working through possibilities and implications. Finally, she looked up at Daniel with those impossible blue eyes. If you're my father, and if Sarah would want to be part of our family, and if Rachel agrees to it, what would that look like? It would look like whatever we wanted it to look like. Maybe Sarah and Rachel could go back to school, pursue careers they're passionate about. Maybe you could have the educational opportunities you deserve. Maybe we could all learn how to be a family together. And you'd want that? All of us, all the complications, all the messiness. Daniel thought about his empty penthouse, his successful but hollow career, the years of grief and guilt that had defined his existence since Lisa's death. Mia, I've been alone for a long time. The idea of having a family again, of having people to care about and protect and learn from, it sounds like the best thing that could possibly happen to me. Even if one of those people is an 8-year-old who asks too many questions and reads physics books for fun. Especially then. Mia smiled for the first time since she'd arrived, and Daniel saw Lisa in that expression, the joy and mischief and boundless curiosity that had made his sister so special. "Okay," Mia said, "but we have to handle this carefully. Rachel's going to be suspicious if too many good things happen at once. And Sarah's going to need time to understand what we're proposing, and we still need to actually prove you're my father. You're right about all of that. So, what's our first step?" Daniel smiled at the word our. "Our first step is a DNA test. Our second step is a very careful conversation with Rachel. Our third step is finding out if Sarah is interested in joining the world's most unusual family. And if any of those steps don't work out, then we figure out a different plan, together." Mia extended her small hand across the table. "Partners?" Daniel shook it solemnly. "Partners." As they prepared to leave, Mia had one more question. "Mr. Carter, what was my mom like? I mean, what was Lisa like when she was happy?" Daniel felt tears prick his eyes. "She was brilliant and stubborn and funny. She could make anyone laugh, even when they were determined to be miserable. She saw the best in people, sometimes before they saw it in themselves. And she would have been so proud of who you've become. I wish I could have known her better. Maybe through each other you still can." As Daniel watched Mia walk away, he realized that in the span of one conversation, an 8-year-old girl had completely restructured his understanding of what family could mean. Now he just had to hope that the other adults in this equation would be willing to take the same leap of faith. His phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Mia asked me to tell you that Phase 1 is complete, and you should initiate Phase 2 as soon as possible. I have no idea what that means, but she seemed confident you would." Daniel laughed out loud, earning curious looks from the other coffee shop patrons. Clearly, his daughter had inherited more than just his analytical abilities. She'd also inherited his talent for strategic planning. The question now was whether Rachel would appreciate being outmaneuvered by her 8-year-old sister, or if this would blow up before any of them had a chance to see what they could build together. The DNA test results arrived on a Thursday morning that felt like the day Daniel's real life finally began. He stared at the document in his hands, the scientific proof of what his heart had already known. Mia Henderson was his daughter, sharing 97% of his genetic markers. 8 years of her life had passed without him, but if he had anything to say about it, he wouldn't miss another moment. Margaret knocked and entered with coffee and a knowing smile. "Good news, I assume." "The best." Daniel set down the results and picked up his phone. "Cancel everything today. I need to have the most important conversation of my life. With Rachel, with all of them. It's time to stop planning and start living." The apartment at 1247 Maple Street looked different when Daniel arrived that afternoon, not because anything had changed, but because he was seeing it through the eyes of a father rather than a stranger. The worn furniture and patched walls no longer spoke of poverty, but of resilience. The careful organization of limited space no longer looked desperate, but resourceful, Rachel answered the door with Mia beside her, and Daniel could see the curiosity and caution warring in both their expressions. Behind them, Sarah sat at the small table, her presence both surprising and perfectly right. "I asked Sarah to be here," Rachel said before Daniel could comment. "Whatever this is about, she's become important to our family." Daniel felt a surge of gratitude for Rachel's instinctive understanding of what mattered. "I'm glad she's here. What I have to say affects all of us." They gathered around the table where Mia had divided so many meager meals, but today the atmosphere was charged with possibility instead of scarcity. Daniel pulled out the DNA results and placed them in the center of the table like an offering. "Mia is my daughter," he said simply, "biological and official and without any doubt." Rachel reached for the papers with shaking hands, scanning the scientific proof of what she'd hoped and feared in equal measure. So it's true. Everything in Mom's letter was true. Which means, Daniel continued carefully, that we need to decide what comes next, for all of us. Sarah spoke for the first time since he'd arrived. "Daniel, can I ask you something?" "Anything. What do you want from this situation, really?" Daniel looked around the table at three faces that had become more important to him than his own comfort, his own plans, his own carefully constructed life. "I want to be Mia's father in every way that matters. I want to give her every opportunity she deserves. I want to make sure Rachel never has to choose between her own dreams and Mia's security. And..." He paused, meeting Sarah's eyes. "I want to build something real with people who understand that family isn't just about biology, it's about choice." "What are you proposing?" Rachel asked quietly. "I'm proposing that we become a family, legally, financially, emotionally, whatever it takes." Daniel took a breath. "I'd like to officially adopt both of you, Rachel as my legal daughter, which would give you access to trust funds and educational opportunities. Mia, as the biological daughter I've missed 8 years with but refuse to miss any more of." Rachel stared at him. "You want to adopt me? I'm 28 years old. Adult adoption is perfectly legal, and it would mean you'd never have to worry about financial security again. You could go back to school, pursue whatever career you want, travel, live the life you've been postponing." "But what about Mia? I can't just abandon—" "You wouldn't be abandoning anyone," Mia interrupted firmly. "You'd be trusting me with the father we both deserve, and finally taking care of yourself for once." Sarah had been listening with growing amazement. "This is incredible, but where do I fit into this picture?" Daniel turned to her, his heart pounding. "Sarah, I know we've only just met, but Mia and Rachel both light up when you're around. You bring something to their lives that I can't provide alone, and if you're willing..." He paused, gathering courage for the most important question of his life. "Would you consider being part of this family? Not just as a friend, but as a partner in raising Mia, in building something extraordinary together?" The silence stretched for several heartbeats. Then Sarah laughed, not mockingly, but with the sound of someone recognizing the answer to a question she'd been afraid to ask. "Are you proposing to me, Daniel Carter?" "I'm proposing that we get to know each other better while building a life that gives these amazing girls everything they deserve. If romance develops along the way, even better. If not, we'll still be family." Sarah looked at Mia and Rachel, seeing the hope and fear and love in their faces. "What do you two think about this crazy plan?" "I think," Mia said solemnly, "that Sarah makes Rachel happy in a way nobody else has. And I think Daniel is the father I've been dreaming about my whole life. And I think if we're all brave enough to try, we could be extraordinary together." Rachel wiped tears from her eyes. "I think I've been so focused on surviving that I forgot to imagine what thriving might look like. But this looks like thriving." "So we're doing this?" Daniel asked, hardly daring to believe it. "We're going to be a family?" "Yeah." "We already are a family," Sarah said, reaching across the table to take his hand. "We just need to make it official." The path to their new life hadn't been without challenges. The first month after the DNA results had been particularly difficult, as they navigated the complex emotions of suddenly expanded family dynamics. Daniel remembered the night Rachel had broken down in tears, overwhelmed by the sudden shift from survival mode to security, unable to believe that her financial struggles were truly over. "I keep waiting for you to change your mind," she had whispered to Daniel that night, sitting in his penthouse living room with legal documents spread across the coffee table. "I keep thinking this is too good to be true." Sarah had been the one to help Rachel understand that accepting help wasn't weakness, it was wisdom. "You spent 8 years being strong for Mia," Sarah had said gently. "Now it's time to let someone be strong for you." The adoption process itself had been emotionally intense. Rachel had struggled with calling Daniel Dad, settling instead on his first name, though the legal documents now clearly established their father-daughter relationship. Mia, by contrast, had embraced the title immediately, as if she'd been waiting her whole life to say it. The move to Queen Anne had been Mia's idea. "We need somewhere that feels like ours," she had announced after spending a weekend in Daniel's penthouse. "Not your old life or our old life, but our new life together." They'd found the perfect house 3 weeks later, a charming craftsman with 4 bedrooms, a large kitchen perfect for Sarah's cooking experiments, and a library that made Mia's eyes light up like Christmas morning. The house had character and warmth, space for privacy and togetherness, and most importantly, it felt like home the moment they walked through the door. Sarah's integration into their family had been the most beautiful surprise. What had started as friendship and mutual respect had slowly blossomed into something deeper. Daniel found himself looking forward to her presence, not just because of what she brought to Mia and Rachel's lives, but because of how she challenged and completed him. Their first real date had been wonderfully awkward. Dinner at a restaurant, while Mia stayed with Rachel, both of them trying to navigate the shift from co-parenting partners to romantic possibilities. Sarah had laughed at his nervousness, reaching across the table to take his hand. "Daniel," she had said, her eyes twinkling with amusement, "we've already decided to build a life together. This part should be the easy part." She'd been right. Romance, when built on a foundation of shared values and genuine friendship, felt natural and inevitable. Their relationship developed at its own pace, unhurried by external pressure, supported by 2 young women who clearly approved of their growing connection. Rachel's transformation had been the most dramatic. Freed from the constant stress of financial insecurity, she'd blossomed into the confident, intelligent woman she'd always been beneath the worry and exhaustion. Her acceptance to Seattle University's education program had been just the beginning. She'd thrown herself into her studies with the passion of someone making up for lost time. "I want to teach high school history," she told them over dinner one night, her face glowing with purpose. "I want to help kids understand that the past informs the present, but it doesn't have to limit the future." Daniel had felt a surge of pride watching her discover her calling. Rachel possessed a natural empathy and wisdom that would make her an exceptional teacher. More importantly, she was finally able to pursue her own dreams without guilt or fear. Mia's development had been equally remarkable. With her basic needs secure and her future bright, she'd channeled her extraordinary intellect into pursuits that brought her joy rather than just survival strategies. She'd joined the robotics club at her new school, started learning Mandarin from Sarah, and begun writing stories that showed the same analytical brilliance she applied to everything else. "Dad," she'd said one evening while they worked on a particularly challenging physics problem together, "do you think Mom would be proud of who we've become?" Daniel had looked at his brilliant daughter, then at Rachel studying at the kitchen table, then at Sarah humming while she prepared tomorrow's lunch, and felt Lisa's presence as surely as if she was standing beside them. "I think," he'd replied, "that your mum orchestrated all of this. That letter didn't just find its way to me by accident. Lisa always had a plan, and her plan was for us to find each other." The evening that changed everything had been 3 weeks ago, when Sarah had asked them to gather in the living room for what she'd called a family meeting. Daniel's stomach had clenched with familiar anxiety. Would she decide this was too much, too complicated, too overwhelming? Instead, Sarah had pulled out a small velvet box and set it on the coffee table between them. "I have a question for all of you," she'd begun, her voice steady but her hands shaking slightly. "Daniel, will you marry me?" The silence that followed had stretched for exactly 3 seconds before Mia had exploded into delighted laughter, and Rachel had started crying happy tears. Daniel had been too stunned to speak, overwhelmed by the perfect rightness of Sarah taking charge of their next chapter. "I know it's unconventional for the woman to propose," Sarah had continued, "but nothing about this family has been conventional. Daniel, I love your brilliant mind and your generous heart. Rachel, I love your strength and your determination to build a better future. Mia, I love your curiosity and your ability to see solutions where others see only problems." She'd paused, meeting each of their eyes in turn. "I want to be your wife, your daughter-in-law, your stepmother. Whatever titles make us officially and legally the family we've already become in our hearts." Daniel's yes had been immediate and emphatic, but it was Mia's response that had sealed the moment. "Does this mean I get to be the maid of honor? Because I have some very specific ideas about optimal wedding planning." 6 months later, Daniel stood in the backyard of their new home in Queen Anne, not a mansion, but a place with enough space for everyone to grow and dream and be themselves. The adoption papers had been finalized the week before, making Rachel officially his daughter and Mia officially his child, in the eyes of the law as well as his heart. The engagement ring on Sarah's finger caught the afternoon sunlight as she gestured enthusiastically while teaching Rachel advanced cooking techniques. They'd set their wedding date for the spring, partly because Mia had calculated that it would give them optimal time for planning, partly because Sarah wanted Rachel to finish her first semester of college before taking time off for the celebration. The house was filled with the sounds of their new life. Rachel's laughter as she talked about her professors and classmates, Sarah's voice explaining the chemistry behind perfect caramelization, and the classical music that Mia had discovered she loved, playing softly in the background while she worked on her latest robotics project. "Dad." Mia appeared at his side, the word still new enough to make his heart skip. "Sarah wants to know if you're ready for dinner. She made that fusion Korean-Italian thing you like." "I'll be right there." Daniel put his arm around his daughter's shoulders, still marveling at how perfectly she fit against his side. "Mia, yeah? Are you happy?" "Really happy?" Mia looked up at him with those brilliant blue eyes that were so like his own, so like Lisa's, so uniquely hers. "Dad, I've been happy for months, but today, watching Sarah teach Rachel how to make her grandmother's kimchi while you helped me with my calculus homework, I realized something." "What's that?" "I'm not just happy. I'm home." As they walked back toward the house where their chosen family waited, Daniel thought about the letter that had started it all. Lisa's final gift, delivered precisely when they all needed it most. He thought about the strange alchemy that had transformed 4 lonely people into something stronger than the sum of their parts. But mostly, he thought about the future stretching ahead of them, bright with possibility and rich with love. Spring wedding plans to finalize, Rachel's graduation to celebrate, Mia's robotics competition to attend, Sarah's career advancement to support, and 1,000 small moments of ordinary happiness that would weave together into the extraordinary tapestry of their shared life. "Come on, Dad," Mia said, tugging at his hand. "Sarah says she has an announcement about the wedding venue, and Rachel found the perfect dress online." Any idea what venue Sarah chose? Mia grinned, and in that expression Daniel saw all the joy and mischief and boundless curiosity that made her so extraordinary. She wants to get married in the backyard, right here where we built our family. She says she can't imagine starting her married life anywhere else. As they stepped through the back door into the warmth of their kitchen, where Rachel and Sarah were laughing over something silly and wonderful, Daniel realized that sometimes the best miracles are the ones you never see coming. His family was waiting, and for the first time in years, Daniel Carter was exactly where he belonged.